The cardboard beneath Maya Chun's sleeping bag had turned soggy from the morning dew, and the familiar ache in her empty stomach reminded her that she hadn't eaten in 36 hours. She pressed her face against the rough fabric of her makeshift pillow, a stuffed backpack containing everything she owned, and listened to the city waking up around her small tent pitched behind the defunct gas station. Car engines hummed past on the street beyond the chain-link fence. Footsteps clicked on concrete. The world moved forward while she remained frozen in this moment of absolute desperation. Clutching the last $5 bill in her pocket like a lifeline, Maya sat up slowly, her joints protesting after another night on the unforgiving ground. Through the tent's mesh window, she could see the corner store across the street where she'd been contemplating spending her final $5 on a package of crackers and maybe a small bottle of water. It wasn't much, but it would keep her alive for another day or two. At 28, she'd never imagined her life would lead to this moment. 6 months ago, she'd been working as a software engineer at a promising startup, living in a decent apartment with her boyfriend Marcus, saving money for their future together. Then the company folded overnight, taking her job and her savings with it. Marcus had left 2 weeks later, claiming he couldn't handle the stress of her situation. The eviction notice had come shortly after. Now, as autumn painted the leaves gold and orange, Maya faced the harsh reality that she might not survive the approaching winter on the streets. She unzipped her tent and stepped outside, stretching her cramped muscles. The morning air bit at her skin through her thin jacket, the only coat she had left after selling everything else of value. Her long black hair hung in tangles past her shoulders, and she could feel the grime on her skin from days without a proper shower. The sound of sobbing made her freeze. Around the corner of the abandoned gas station, partially hidden behind a rusted dumpster, sat an elderly man. His shoulders shook with quiet tears, and his weathered hands covered his face. He wore a faded brown jacket that had seen better decades, and his shoes were held together with duct tape. Maya hesitated. Every instinct told her to mind her own business, to focus on her own survival. She had exactly $5 to her name, and winter was coming fast. But something about the man's posture, the way he seemed to fold in on himself, reminded her of her grandfather, who had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. "Are you okay?" The words escaped her lips before she could stop them. The man looked up, revealing watery blue eyes in a face mapped with deep lines. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I didn't know anyone was here. I'll move along. No, please don't leave because of me." Maya approached slowly, the way she might approach a wounded animal. "I'm Maya. Are you hurt?" He studied her face for a long moment, taking in her own obvious circumstances, the tent behind her, the worn clothes, the hollow look of hunger in her eyes. "I'm Walter," he said finally. "And no, I'm not hurt. Not physically anyway." Maya settled down on the ground beside him, ignoring the cold seeping through her jeans. "Sometimes the other kind of hurt is worse." Walter's laugh held no humor. "My daughter, she's in the hospital. It has been 3 weeks now. Heart surgery. Complications." His voice cracked. "I've been trying to scrape together the money for a bus ticket to see her, but I'm still $12 short. The doctors say—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Maya's heart clenched. $12, she had 5. It still wouldn't be enough, but it would get him closer. She thought about the crackers in the corner store, about the gnawing hunger that had become her constant companion. Then she thought about Walter's daughter, alone in a hospital bed, wondering why her father hadn't come to see her, without allowing herself to think too hard about it. Maya pulled the crumpled $5 bill from her pocket. "Here." Walter stared at the money, then at her tent, then back at her face. "I can't take that. You need it more than I do. Your daughter needs her father more than I need crackers." Maya pressed the bill into his weathered palm. "Take it, please." "But how will you eat?" Maya forced a smile. I'll figure something out. I always do. Walter's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these seemed different, somehow warmer. I don't know how to thank you. Just go see your daughter. That's enough, thanks. Walter stood up slowly, clutching the $5 bill like it was made of gold. What's your full name, child? Maya Chen. Maya Chen, he repeated, as if committing it to memory. I won't forget this kindness. I promise you that. After Walter disappeared around the corner, Maya sat alone behind the dumpster, feeling the emptiness in her pocket where the money had been. The hunger in her stomach seemed to grow sharper, more insistent. She'd just given away her last hope of food for the next few days, and winter was coming fast. But as she looked up at the cloudy sky, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. She'd made a difference in someone's life, even if it meant sacrificing her own comfort. Now, she just had to figure out how to survive the next few days without a penny to her name. Corner store across the street mocked her with its bright lights and promise of food. Maya turned away and crawled back into her tent, pulling her thin blanket around her shoulders. She'd sleep through the afternoon to conserve energy, then maybe walk to the soup kitchen on 5th Street. It was a long walk, but they served dinner. On Tuesday's dot, she was just drifting off to sleep when the sound of footsteps on gravel made her eyes snap open. Through the mesh window, she could see someone approaching her tent, someone wearing expensive-looking shoes. Maya's heart rate spiked. In her months on the street, she'd learned that people in expensive shoes rarely brought good news for someone in her situation. She remained perfectly still, hoping whoever it was would move along. The footsteps stopped directly outside her tent. "Excuse me," a woman's voice called softly. "Are you Maya Chen?" Maya's blood turned to ice water in her veins. Nobody knew her name except Walter, and she'd just met him an hour ago. How could this stranger possibly know who she was? "I'm sorry to disturb you," the woman continued, her voice carrying a slight accent Maya couldn't identify. "I just need to speak with you for a moment. It's very important." Maya's mind raced through possibilities. Had she done something wrong? Was this about the tent? She wasn't technically supposed to be camping here, but the property had been abandoned for months. Maybe someone had finally complained to the authorities. Who's asking? Maya called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "My name is Elena Vasquez. I work for someone who would very much like to meet you." That didn't sound ominous at all. Maya unzipped her tent slowly and peered out. The woman standing before her looked like she'd stepped out of a high-end business magazine. She wore a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, her dark hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. Her shoes probably cost more than Maya used to make in a month, but her expression wasn't cold or judgmental. Instead, she looked at Maya with something that might have been curiosity or even respect. "How do you know my name?" Maya asked, climbing out of her tent and standing to face this strange visitor. "Walter Morrison told us about you." "Walter? But he just left an hour ago." "How could he?" "He called his employer," Elena explained. "Mr. Morrison works for my boss, Mr. Chen." When Walter explained what had happened, "Mr. Chen asked me to find you immediately." Maya's head spun. "Mr. Chen? That's my last name too. Is he related to me somehow?" Elena's expression remained carefully neutral. "I think it would be better if Mr. Chen explained the situation himself. Would you be willing to come with me? I promise you're not in any trouble." Every survival instinct Maya had developed over the past 6 months screamed at her to refuse. Strange women in expensive suits didn't just show up offering help without some kind of catch. But what choice did she have? She was broke, hungry, and winter was coming fast. "Where would we be going?" "Not far. Mr. Chen is waiting in his car just around the corner." Maya glanced back at her tent and the few possessions scattered inside. "Will I be able to come back for my things?" "Of course. Though I suspect you might not need to." That cryptic response sent another chill down Maya's spine. She grabbed her backpack and sleeping bag, unwilling to leave everything behind, and followed Elena around the corner of the abandoned gas station. A black Rolls-Royce sat idling at the curb. Maya stopped dead in her tracks. She'd seen cars like this in movies, but never in real life. The sleek vehicle looked completely out of place in this run-down neighborhood. Like a black swan in a puddle of pigeons, Elena opened the rear door and gestured for Maya to enter. Maya hesitated. "I'm not exactly dressed for ... She gestured at the expensive car. "Mr. Chen doesn't care about clothes," Elena assured her. "He cares about character, please." Taking a deep breath, Maya slid into the backseat of the most luxurious vehicle she'd ever seen. The leather seats were butter-soft, and the interior smelled faintly of cedar and expensive cologne. Across from her sat a man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Miss Chen," he said, extending his hand. "I'm David Chen. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Maya shook his hand, acutely aware of how dirty her own must be. "Are we related?" David Chen smiled. "That's exactly what I was hoping to find out. But first, I wanted to thank you personally for what you did for Walter this morning. You didn't need to track me down for that. Anyone would have done the same thing, would they?" David's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Walter Morrison has worked for my family for 37 years. He's been our groundskeeper, our maintenance supervisor, and in recent years, something of a grandfather figure to my own children. When his daughter Sarah was born with a heart defect, my father paid for her first surgery. We've been helping with her medical expenses ever since." Maya felt confused. "So if you've been helping with the medical bills, why did Walter need money for a bus ticket?" "Because Walter is too proud to ask for help with anything that isn't directly related to Sarah's care. He's been sleeping in our garden shed for the past 3 weeks, refusing to take money for personal expenses while he stays close to the hospital. When Sarah took a turn for the worse yesterday, Walter was beside himself. He had spent his last few dollars on hospital parking fees." The car began to move, gliding smoothly through the city streets. Maya watched familiar landmarks pass by outside the window, wondering where they were heading. "Walter called me an hour ago," David continued. "He told me about a young woman named Maya Chen who gave him her last $5 without expecting anything in return. A woman who was clearly struggling herself but chose to help a stranger in need." "It wasn't that big a deal," Maya said uncomfortably. "It was to Walter, and it was to me." David leaned forward slightly. "You see, Maya, my grandfather emigrated to this country from Taiwan in 1952. His name was Chen Wei-Ming. But when he arrived at Ellis Island, the immigration officer wrote down William Chen instead. Grandfather never corrected it." Maya's heart began to beat faster. "My great-grandfather was named Chen Wei-Ming. He came here from Taiwan in the early 1950s. David's eyes widened. "What was your grandfather's name?" "Chen Ming Dao. He used to tell me stories about his father, who died when my grandfather was very young. He said his father had changed his name to something American when he came to this country, but he never knew what." The car fell silent except for the soft hum of the engine. David stared at Maya with an expression she couldn't read. "Elena," he said quietly, "please take us to the estate. I think we need to have a much longer conversation. What do you think will happen next?" Share your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories. The Chen estate sat on 50 acres of rolling hills outside the city, hidden behind wrought iron gates and towering oak trees. As the Rolls-Royce wound up the tree-lined driveway, Maya pressed her face to the window in disbelief. The mansion that came into view looked like something from a fairy tale. 3 stories of cream-colored stone with bay windows, decorative turrets, and ivy climbing the walls. "This is where you live?" Maya whispered. My family has owned this property for 40 years, David replied. My father bought it when his business began to succeed. Maya thought about her own living situation, a tent behind an abandoned gas station, and felt a crushing sense of inadequacy. What was she doing here? Even if they were related, she didn't belong in a world like this. The car stopped in front of a grand entrance with marble steps and ornate columns. Elena came around to open Maya's door, but Maya hesitated. I don't understand what's happening, she said to David. Even if we are cousins or something, why does that matter? Why did you come looking for me? David's expression grew serious. Because family matters, Maya, and because your act of kindness this morning reminded me of something my grandfather used to say. True wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the compassion we show to strangers. Maya followed David and Elena up the marble steps and through a front door that probably cost more than most people's cars. The interior of the mansion took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, and oil paintings in gilded frames lined the walls of the foyer. Would you like to freshen up before we continue our conversation? Elena asked kindly. I can show you to a guest room. Maya became acutely aware of her grimy clothes and unwashed hair. I don't have anything clean to change into. That won't be a problem, Elena assured her. 20 minutes later, Maya stood in a marble bathroom the size of her old apartment, staring at herself in a mirror that probably cost more than she used to make in a week. She'd showered with soap that smelled like lavender and honey, and Elena had provided fresh clothes, jeans, and a soft blue sweater that fit perfectly. For the first time in months, Maya looked almost like her old self. The hollow look of hunger was still there, and her cheekbones were sharper than they used to be. But clean clothes and a hot shower had worked wonders for her confidence. When she came downstairs, she found David waiting in what he called the family room, though it was larger than most people's entire homes. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens, and a fire crackled in a stone fireplace tall enough for Maya to stand in. Please sit, David said, gesturing to a comfortable leather chair near the fire. I've asked the kitchen to prepare some food. I imagine you're quite hungry. As if summoned by his words, Elena appeared with a tray containing what looked like the most delicious meal Maya had ever seen: grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, and a bowl of soup that smelled like heaven. Maya's stomach growled loudly enough to be audible across the room. She wanted to maintain some dignity, but the sight and smell of real food after days of hunger was overwhelming. Please, David said gently. Eat. We can talk while you have your meal. Maya didn't need to be asked twice. The first bite of salmon nearly brought tears to her eyes. It had been so long since she'd tasted anything besides the bland offerings at soup kitchens and the occasional stale sandwich from charity organizations. Better? David asked with a smile. Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak around the lump in her throat. Good. Now let me tell you what I know about our family history, and you can tell me if any of it sounds familiar. David settled into the chair across from her and pulled out a leather-bound photo album. My grandfather, Chen Wei-Ming, arrived in San Francisco in 1952 with nothing but the clothes on his back and a few precious family photographs. He'd fled Taiwan during the political upheaval, leaving behind his wife and infant son. Maya paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. His wife and son didn't come with him? They were supposed to follow 6 months later, once he'd established himself here. But something went wrong. The letters stopped coming. My grandfather spent years trying to find out what had happened to them, but the political situation in Taiwan made it impossible to get reliable information. David turned a page in the album, revealing a black and white photograph of a young man who looked remarkably similar to Maya's grandfather. My grandfather eventually remarried and had my father, but he never stopped searching for his first family. When he died in 1987, he made my father promise to continue looking. And did he? For a while. But the trail was cold, and private investigators were expensive. After my father passed away 5 years ago, I hired a genealogy company to do DNA research and trace family records. They've been working on it ever since. Maya set down her fork, her appetite suddenly forgotten. What did they find? They found evidence that my grandfather's first wife, Lin Meihua, died in 1954, but her son, my grandfather's son, survived. He would have been about 3 years old when his mother died. What happened to him? He was adopted by an American family stationed in Taiwan. A military couple named the Chens, ironically enough, who brought him back to the United States when their tour of duty ended. Maya's hands began to tremble. What was the boy's name? Chen Mingdao. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She gripped the arms of her chair, trying to process what David was telling her. That was my grandfather's name, I know, David said softly. The genealogy company found his adoption records last month. They've been trying to trace his descendants ever since. When Walter called me this morning and mentioned your name, I had Alina contact the investigators immediately. They confirmed what I already suspected. Maya stared at him, unable to speak. Maya, David continued, my grandfather's first son was your grandfather, which makes you my second cousin. But more than that, according to my grandfather's will, any descendants of his first family are entitled to an equal share of the Chen estate. The room seemed to spin around Maya. I don't understand. Your grandfather was my grandfather's firstborn son. By law and by family tradition, he should have inherited everything. Since your grandfather passed away, that inheritance passes to his descendants. His descendants, Maya repeated numbly. You, Maya. As far as the investigators can determine, you're Chen Mingdao's only living descendant. Maya stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. The perfectly manicured garden stretched out before her, but she barely saw them. This is insane. Yesterday I was homeless, and now you're telling me I'm some kind of heiress? Not some kind of heiress, David corrected gently. You're my cousin, and you're entitled to half of everything my family has built over the past 70 years. Half of everything? Maya turned to stare at him. What does that mean, exactly? David gestured around the room. This estate. The businesses my grandfather and father built. The investments, the properties, the trust funds. He paused. Maya, you're looking at approximately $37 million. The number hit her like a sledgehammer. Maya sank back into her chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. 37 million, she whispered. The legal paperwork will take some time to finalize, but there's no question about your claim. Your family, Maya. You belong here. Maya looked around the opulent room, then down at her borrowed clothes, then back at David's kind face. This morning she'd been sleeping in a tent, worrying about where her next meal would come from. Now she was sitting in a mansion being told she was worth tens of millions of dollars. I need some air, she said suddenly. Of course. Elena can show you around the grounds. Take all the time you need. Maya stood on shaky legs and headed for the French doors that led to the garden. Her mind reeled with questions and doubts. How could any of this be real? And if it was real, what did it mean for her life? As she stepped outside into the cool afternoon air, one thought echoed in her mind. This morning, she'd given her last $5 to a stranger. Had that single act of kindness somehow led to this moment? The idea seemed too impossible to believe, but as Maya walked through the perfectly manicured gardens of her newfound family's estate, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Maya spent 2 hours walking through the Chen estate gardens, trying to process everything David had told her. The property was like a small kingdom, complete with a greenhouse, a tennis court, a swimming pool that looked like it belonged at a resort, and what Elena had mentioned was a 6-car garage. Every time Maya thought she'd wrapped her mind around The situation, another wave of disbelief would crash over her. $37 million. The number was so large it felt abstract, like play money in a board game. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Maya made her way back to the main house. She found David in his study, a room lined floor to ceiling with books and dominated by an enormous mahogany desk. "Feeling better?" he asked, looking up from a stack of papers. "More confused, if anything," Maya admitted, settling into a leather chair across from his desk. "David, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why are you being so accepting of all this? I mean, I showed up out of nowhere, and you're ready to hand over half of your family's fortune based on what could be a coincidence. Aren't you even a little suspicious?" David set down his pen and studied her face. "Do you want me to be suspicious? I want you to be smart. I could be anyone. I could be lying about my grandfather's name or trying to con you somehow. Are you? No, of course not. But how do you know that?" David smiled. "Maya, do you remember what you did this morning?" "I gave Walter $5. "Your last $5, David corrected. "When you were homeless and hungry, you gave a stranger your last hope of food because his needs seemed greater than yours. Does that sound like the behavior of someone running a con?" Maya shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "People do strange things when they're desperate. Yes, they do. They become selfish. They hoard resources. They look out for themselves first." David leaned forward. "They don't give away their last $5 to help someone they've never met before. It was just $5. "It was everything you had in the world," David said quietly. "And you gave it freely, without expecting anything in return. That tells me more about your character than any DNA test ever could." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. What if the DNA test comes back negative? What if we're not actually related? "Then you'll still be welcome in this house for as long as you want to stay," David said without hesitation. "Family isn't just about shared blood, Maya. It's about shared values. And anyone who would give their last $5 to a stranger is someone I'm proud to call family." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of David's words settling between them. Finally, Maya spoke again. "Assuming all of this is real, and I'm still not entirely convinced it's not some kind of elaborate dream, what happens now? Well, first we need to get you some proper clothes and personal items. Elena has already prepared a room for you here, if you'd like to stay while we sort out the legal details." "You want me to live here?" "This is your home now, Maya. It was always your home. We just didn't know it yet." Maya looked around the study, taking in the oil paintings and antique furniture. "I don't know how to live like this. I don't know the rules." "There are no rules," David assured her. "Well, except one. We take care of each other. That's what family does." Before Maya could respond, Elena appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see Maya." "Walter." David's face lit up. "How's Sarah?" "Much better, thanks to this young lady." Walter stepped into the room, his weathered face creased with smiles. He'd cleaned up since Maya had seen him that morning. His hair was combed, and he wore a pressed white shirt instead of his faded jacket. Maya stood up, suddenly embarrassed. "Walter, I wanted to thank you properly," Walter interrupted, pulling a small wrapped package from his pocket. "Sarah's surgery went well. The doctors say she should make a full recovery." "I'm so glad," Maya said, accepting the package. "But you didn't need to bring me anything." "Open it," Walter urged. Maya unwrapped the small box to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny heart with the words, "Kindness Matters" engraved on it. "Sarah made me promise to give this to you," Walter explained. "She said anyone who would help a stranger deserves to remember that their kindness makes a difference in the world." Maya stared at the bracelet, overwhelmed. "She made this for me?" "She's been working on it for weeks, ever since she got to the hospital." Said she wanted to give it to someone who needed to know they mattered. Walter's voice grew thick with emotion. I never imagined I'd find that person so close to home. David cleared his throat. Walter, Maya is going to be staying with us for a while. She's family. Walter's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he just nodded. Well then, welcome home, Miss Maya. As Walter left to return to the hospital, Maya fastened the bracelet around her wrist. The small heart charm caught the light from David's desk lamp, and she found herself thinking about the strange chain of events that had led her here. Maya, David said softly, I know this is overwhelming. If you need time to think about everything, I understand. But I want you to know that this offer isn't conditional on DNA tests or legal paperwork. You have a place here regardless of what any document says. Maya looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Why? Why are you being so kind to me? Because 70 years ago, my grandfather came to this country with nothing. He built everything you see here through hard work and determination. But he never forgot what it felt like to be alone and desperate. David gestured around the room. He always said that wealth was meaningless unless you used it to help others. What good is having all this if I can't share it with my family? But what if I don't fit in? What if I can't learn to live like this? David smiled. Maya, you just spent 6 months surviving on the streets. You managed to stay hopeful and compassionate even when you had nothing. Trust me, learning which fork to use at dinner is going to be the easy part. That night, Maya lay in a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud, staring up at a ceiling painted with stars. The guest room was larger than any apartment she'd ever lived in, with its own fireplace, sitting area, and bathroom that looked like a spa. She should have been happy. She should have been celebrating her incredible change of fortune. Instead, she felt lost and overwhelmed. Part of her wondered if she was dreaming, if she'd wake up tomorrow morning back in her tent behind the gas station. Part of her wondered if David would change his mind once the reality of sharing his fortune set in. And part of her wondered if she deserved any of this. All her life, Maya had believed that good things happen to good people through hard work and determination. But she'd been working hard for months, and the only thing that had happened was a steady slide into poverty and desperation. Now, suddenly, everything had changed because of a $5 bill and a chance encounter with a crying old man. Maya touched the silver bracelet on her wrist, feeling the smooth surface of the heart charm. Kindness matters, she whispered to the painted stars above her. Maybe that was the lesson she was supposed to learn. Maybe her months of struggle hadn't been meaningless if they'd taught her to recognize when others were in pain. Maybe the universe had been preparing her for this moment all along. As Maya finally drifted off to sleep in her impossibly comfortable bed, she made a silent promise to herself. If this new life was real, she would use it to help others the way David and Walter and even little Sarah were helping her. After all, she thought drowsily, kindness matters. Maya woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to close the night before. For a confused moment, she thought she was still dreaming. The silk sheets, the painted ceiling, the warmth, none of it matched the cold reality of her tent. Then memory crashed back. David Chen, the DNA revelation, $37 million, and a life that had changed overnight because of $5 and an act of kindness. Soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, Maya called. Sitting up and pulling the covers around herself, Elena entered carrying a tray with coffee, fresh fruit, and what looked like homemade pastries. Good morning. I hope you slept well. Better than I have in months, Maya admitted, but I could have come down for breakfast. You didn't need to bring it up. Mr. Chen thought you might want some time to adjust before meeting with the investigators. Maya's stomach dropped. Investigators? The genealogy team. They're here to collect DNA samples and finalize the family tree research. Elena set the tray on a small table by the window. But there's no rush. They can wait until you're ready. After Elena left, Maya sat by the window eating the most delicious pastry she'd ever tasted and watching gardeners tend the estate grounds. 3 men in suits waited on the terrace below, briefcases and equipment at their feet. The reality of her situation hit her again. This wasn't just about David being kind to a stranger. There were legal implications, inheritance laws, and apparently enough money at stake to warrant professional investigators. Maya dressed quickly in jeans and a sweater Alina had provided, then made her way downstairs. She found David in the kitchen, a room that looked like it belonged in a high-end restaurant, with professional-grade appliances and a marble island the size of her old living room. "Morning," David said cheerfully, looking up from his newspaper. "How did you sleep?" "Like I was dead to the world." Maya accepted the cup of coffee he offered her. "David, about these investigators... You're having second thoughts." "It wasn't a question," Maya nodded. "What if the DNA test proves we're not related? What if this is all a mistake?" David folded his newspaper and gave her his full attention. "Maya, I want you to understand something. Whether or not we share DNA doesn't change the fact that you have a place here. You've already proven you're the kind of person my grandfather would have been proud to call family. But the inheritance will go where it legally belongs. If you're Chen Wei-Ming's great-granddaughter, then half of everything here is rightfully yours. If you're not, then you're still welcome to stay as long as you want." David's expression grew serious. "But Maya, I think you should know something else." "What?" "The investigators didn't just start looking into your family history yesterday. They've been tracking Chen Mingdao's descendants for months. They already have preliminary evidence that strongly suggests you're my grandfather's great-granddaughter." Maya set down her coffee cup. "What kind of evidence?" "Birth certificates, adoption records, military documents from your grandfather's adoptive family. The paper trail is quite extensive." David paused. "The DNA test is really just a formality at this point." Before Maya could respond, Elena appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but the investigators are ready whenever you are. And there's something else. Walter is here with his daughter." Maya's heart jumped. "Sarah's here? She wanted to meet you in person." Maya followed Elena through the house to a sunny sitting room where Walter sat next to a pale but smiling girl who looked to be about 12. Sarah had her father's blue eyes and delicate features, though Maya could see the toll her illness had taken in the careful way she moved and the medical bracelet on her thin wrist. "You must be Maya," Sarah said, her voice soft but warm. "Daddy told me what you did." Maya knelt down beside Sarah's chair. "I'm so glad you're feeling better. Your father was very worried about you." "He shouldn't worry so much," Sarah said with the matter-of-fact tone of a child who'd grown up dealing with serious illness. "I'm tougher than I look." She held up her hand, showing off a new silver bracelet that matched the one she'd given. "Maya, we're bracelet twins now." Maya laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had in months. "I love mine. I wore it to bed last night." "Good. Daddy says you're going to live here now with Mr. Chen." "Maybe. We're still figuring things out." Sarah nodded seriously. "Daddy says when people are kind to strangers, good things happen to them. He says it's like magic, but real." "Your daddy is a very wise man." "I know," Sarah grinned. "Will you come visit me in the hospital sometime? It gets boring there." "Of course I will," Maya promised. "Maybe I can bring you some books or games." "Really?" Sarah's face lit up. "Nobody ever brings me presents except Daddy and Mr. Chen." Walter cleared his throat, his eyes suspiciously bright. "We should let Maya get to her meeting. The doctors want Sarah back for her afternoon rest anyway." As Walter and Sarah prepared to leave, Sarah hugged Maya tightly. "Thank you for helping my daddy," she whispered. "You're like a fairy godmother, except real." After they left, Maya felt more grounded somehow. Whatever was happening with DNA tests and inheritances, She'd made a real difference in the lives of people who mattered to her. That felt more valuable than any amount of money. David found her in the sitting room, staring out the window at Walter's retreating figure. Ready to face the investigators? As ready as I'll ever be. The lead investigator introduced himself as Dr. Marcus Webb, a genealogist who specialized in tracking families separated by war and political upheaval. His two associates were a DN, a specialist, and a legal researcher who dealt with inheritance claims. Miss Chen, Dr. Webb began, setting up recording equipment on the coffee table. We'd like to start by having you tell us everything you know about your family history, particularly your grandfather Chen Ming-Dao. For the next hour, Maya recounted everything she could remember about her grandfather's stories. She told them about his memories of being adopted, his adoptive parents' military service in Taiwan, and the fragments of information he'd shared about his birth father. Your grandfather never tried to trace his biological family? The legal researcher asked. He talked about it sometimes, but he said the political situation in Taiwan made it too difficult. And honestly, I think he was afraid of what he might find. His adoptive parents were wonderful to him. He didn't want to dishonor their memory by seeking out his birth family. Dr. Webb nodded. That's actually quite common. Many adoptees from that era felt conflicted about searching for biological relatives. He pulled out a folder thick with documents. Ms. Chen, I want to show you some of the evidence we've gathered. The first document was a birth certificate written in Chinese characters, with an English translation attached. This is Chen Ming-Dao's original birth certificate from Taiwan, dated 1951. It lists his father as Chen Wei-Ming and his mother as Lin Mei-Hua. Maya stared at the document, seeing her grandfather's name in official print for the first time. How did you find this? Taiwan has been digitizing their historical records. We were able to access birth and death certificates from the 1950s. Dr. Webb pulled out another document. This is Lin Mei-Hua's death certificate from 1954. It lists Chen Ming-Dao as her surviving child. The next document was in English adoption papers from the U.S. military base in Taiwan. Maya saw her grandfather's name again, along with the names of his adoptive parents, Colonel James Chun and his wife Margaret. The Chuns were stationed in Taiwan from 1952 to 1955, the legal researcher explained. They adopted your grandfather in 1954, shortly after his mother's death. When their tour ended, they brought him back to California. Maya studied the adoption papers, feeling a strange connection to the scared 3-year-old boy her grandfather had been. What happened to Chen Wei-Ming, my great-grandfather? That's where the story gets interesting, Dr. Webb said. He pulled out a ship's manifest dated 1952. Chen Wei-Ming arrived in San Francisco on this ship. According to immigration records, he was processed at Angel Island and given temporary residency status. But he never became a citizen. Actually, he did, but not as Chen Wei-Ming. Dr. Webb showed her a naturalization certificate dated 1958. He legally changed his name to William Chen during the naturalization process. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. William Chen, that was David's grandfather. Exactly. Chen Wei-Ming and William Chen are the same person. Your great-grandfather and Mr. Chen's grandfather were the same man. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Maya looked across the room at David, who was watching her with a mixture of anticipation and concern. So we really are cousins, Maya said quietly. Second cousins, to be precise, Dr. Webb confirmed. Your grandfather and Mr. Chen's father were half-brothers, same father, different mothers. The DNA specialist stepped forward. We'd still like to collect samples to confirm the genetic relationship, but based on the documentary evidence, there's no doubt about the family connection. Maya nodded absently, still processing everything. Dr. Webb, can I ask you something? How did you start looking for my grandfather's family? What made you think to search for descendants? Dr. Webb exchanged glances with David. Mr. Chen hired U.S. 5 years ago, after his father passed away. Apparently, William Chen, your great-grandfather, had left very specific instructions in his will about searching for his first family. What kind of instructions? David answered this time. My grandfather never stopped hoping that his first wife and son had survived. He set aside money specifically for finding them or their descendants. When I inherited the estate, I found a letter he'd written explaining that he'd always felt guilty about starting a new family here, while his first family might still be alive in Taiwan. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. He felt guilty? He'd fled political persecution with the intention of bringing his wife and child to America once he was established. When the letters stopped coming, he assumed the worst. But he never stopped wondering if somehow they'd survived and he'd abandoned them. So when we found evidence that Chen Mingdao had been adopted and brought to America, Mr. Chen was determined to find his descendants, Dr. Webb added. We've been searching for you for 5 years. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. All this time, I thought I was completely alone in the world. I never imagined I had family out there looking for me. You're not alone anymore, David said softly. You never have to be alone again. The DNA testing took only a few minutes, a simple cheek swab that would be processed over the next few days. But as Dr. Webb explained, the results were really just for legal documentation. The paper trail was clear enough to satisfy any court. After the investigators left, Maya and David sat in the garden, watching the sun set over the estate grounds. Maya fingered the silver bracelet on her wrist, thinking about the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. David, she said finally, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Are you happy about this, really? Because this morning you woke up as the sole heir to a massive fortune, and now you're finding out you have to share it with someone you just met. David was quiet for a long moment, considering her question. Maya, can I tell you about the last conversation I had with my father? Maya nodded. He was dying, cancer. In his final weeks, he kept talking about his regrets. But the biggest regret wasn't anything he'd done. It was something he hadn't done. David's voice grew thick with emotion. He said he'd failed to find his half-brother. He said the family fortune felt empty because it wasn't complete. There was a whole branch of the Chen family tree missing. Your father knew about my grandfather? My grandfather had told him everything before he died. About Chen Wei-Ming's first family, about the guilt he'd carried for 70 years, about the money set aside for finding them. David turned to look at Maya directly. My father made me promise to keep searching. He said the Chen family wouldn't be whole until we found everyone who belonged. Maya felt fresh tears threatening. So I'm not taking anything away from you. I'm completing something. Exactly. You're not taking half of what's mine, Maya. You're claiming half of what was always yours. David smiled. Besides, $37 million is a lot for one person. I'm looking forward to having someone to share it with. That evening, Maya called the one person she'd maintained contact with during her months on the street, her former college roommate Jessica, who now lived across the country but had never stopped checking in via text messages. Maya. Oh my God, I've been so worried about you. Jessica's voice came through the phone, warm with relief. Where are you calling from? Are you somewhere safe? Maya looked around the opulent guest room, hardly believing she was about to say the words. Jess, you're not going to believe what happened to me. She told Jessica everything, the tent, the last $5, Walter's tears, the Rolls-Royce, and the revelation about her family. Jessica listened in increasingly stunned silence. Wait, Jessica finally said. Wait, are you telling me that you gave away your last $5 yesterday morning, and today you're a millionaire? $37 million apparently. 37 million. Jessica's voice was faint. Maya, That's not possible. Things like that don't happen in real life. That's what I keep telling myself. But I'm sitting in a mansion right now, Jess. I had dinner with a man who might be my second cousin, and there are legal documents proving that I'm entitled to half of one of the biggest family fortunes in the state, because you gave $5 to a stranger. Because I gave $5 to the right stranger at the right time. Maya touched her bracelet. Jess, do you remember what you used to say in college? About how kindness always comes back to you? I was talking about karma in general terms, not instant millionaire status, Maya laughed. I know. But maybe that's exactly how it works. Maybe kindness really does create its own kind of magic. After she hung up with Jessica, Maya sat by her window looking out at the estate grounds. Tomorrow she would start learning how to manage her new life. There would be lawyers and financial advisors, investment portfolios, and trust funds to understand. She would have to figure out how to live in a world she'd never imagined being part of. But tonight, she was simply grateful. Grateful for Walter's tears that had moved her to generosity. Grateful for David's kindness and immediate acceptance. Grateful for Sarah's innocent wisdom about the magic of helping strangers. Most of all, she was grateful for her grandfather's stories about a birth father who had never stopped hoping his first family would someday be found. Chen Wei-Ming had set in motion a chain of events that had taken 70 years to complete, but had ultimately brought his scattered family back together. Maya fell asleep that night, thinking about a great-grandfather she'd never met, whose love and guilt and hope had reached across decades to change her life forever. The tension is building. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which character you're rooting for. Your support helps me create more incredible stories like this one. Maya woke on her third morning at the Chen estate to find Alina waiting outside her door with a concerned expression and a cup of coffee. "I'm sorry to wake you so early," Elena said, "but there's been a development you need to know about." Maya's stomach dropped. After 2 days of fairy tale treatment, she'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop. What kind of development? The DNA results came back faster than expected. Dr. Webb called an hour ago. They expedited the testing. Elena paused. "Maya, you're definitely Chen Wei-Ming's great-granddaughter. The genetic match is conclusive." Relief flooded through Maya, followed immediately by a new wave of anxiety. "So it's official. I really am inheriting $37 million. Actually," Elena said carefully, "there's more. Mr. Chen would like to speak with you as soon as you're ready. The legal team is here, and there are some complications we need to discuss." Maya dressed quickly and hurried downstairs to find David's study filled with people in expensive suits. David himself looked tired, as if he'd been up all night. And there was a tension in the room that made Maya's skin crawl. "Maya," David said, standing as she entered. "Thank you for coming down. I'd like you to meet my attorney, Margaret Walsh, and our family financial advisor, Robert Kim." Maya shook hands with both lawyers, noting their professional smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Elena said there were complications?" Margaret Walsh, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, opened a thick folder. "Ms. Chen, now that your family relationship has been confirmed, we need to discuss the legal realities of your inheritance claim." "What kind of legal realities?" "The Chen family fortune is significantly larger than $37 million, Robert Kim explained. "That was just the liquid assets we mentioned initially. When you include the real estate holdings, business investments, and trust funds, we're looking at closer to $85 million in total assets." Maya sank into a chair. $85 million? Which means your inheritance is actually closer to $42 million, Margaret continued. "But there's a problem. The estate has been structured for 70 years under the assumption that David was the sole heir. Suddenly redistributing half the assets will trigger enormous tax consequences. We're talking about tens of millions in penalties and fees." David leaned forward. "Maya, What they're trying to say is that while you're legally entitled to half of everything, actually claiming your inheritance immediately could bankrupt both of us. Maya felt like she was drowning. I don't understand. Yesterday you were talking about this being simple. We thought it would be, Margaret said. But we've spent all night reviewing the estate structure with our financial team. Your great-grandfather's will was written in 1987, long before modern tax laws. The legal mechanism he set up for finding and compensating his first family wasn't designed to handle this size inheritance. So what does that mean for me? Robert Kim pulled out a calculator and several spreadsheets. It means we need to restructure everything carefully. We're talking about a process that could take 6 months to a year, with careful transfer of assets designed to minimize tax exposure. And in the meantime? In the meantime, David said, you're still family and you still live here. We'll set up a generous monthly allowance so you can start building your new life, and we'll work together to figure out the best way to handle the inheritance. Maya stared at the legal documents scattered across David's desk, feeling overwhelmed. How generous is generous? We were thinking $50,000 a month to start, Margaret said. That should cover any personal expenses while we sort out the larger issues. $50,000 a month. Maya had been living on less than $50 a week just 3 days ago. The number was so large it felt meaningless. There's something else, David said quietly. Margaret, would you and Robert give us a few minutes? Alone? After the lawyers left, David moved to the chair beside Maya's. I can see you're overwhelmed. I want you to know that none of this changes anything between us, doesn't it? Maya looked at him directly. David, be honest with me. Are you relieved that I can't just take half your fortune and walk away tomorrow? David was quiet for a long moment. Do you want an honest answer? Yes, part of me is relieved, he admitted. Not because I don't want to share with you, but because I was terrified you'd take your inheritance and disappear. I've just found a family, Maya. I don't want to lose you again. You thought I'd just take the money and leave, wouldn't you? If someone handed you $42 million, wouldn't you want to start fresh somewhere else? Build your own life without the complications of family expectations and responsibilities? Maya considered his question seriously. 3 days ago, I might have, but now ... She gestured around the study. David, I've been alone for so long. I buried my grandfather when I was 25, and since then I've had no one. Do you really think I'd walk away from the first real family I've had in years? Relief flooded David's face. So you'll stay? We'll figure this out together. I'll stay. But I need you to understand something. I don't know how to be rich. I don't know how to manage millions of dollars or live in a world where $50,000 a month is considered a reasonable allowance. We'll learn together. And Maya, there's something I want to propose. What? David pulled out a manila folder she hadn't noticed before. While Margaret and Robert were calculating tax implications, I was thinking about what my grandfather would have wanted. He didn't just set aside money for finding his first family. He wanted to use that money to help people. Maya opened the folder to find documents outlining something called the Chen Family Foundation. What is this? It's a charitable foundation I started 3 years ago. Currently, it's funded with about $2 million, and we use it to help families in crisis medical bills, housing assistance, educational scholarships. David's voice grew excited. But with your inheritance, we could expand it exponentially. We could help thousands of families instead of hundreds. Maya studied the foundation documents, seeing photos of families who had received help. Children who'd received scholarships, parents who'd been able to afford medical treatments, families who'd avoided eviction thanks to temporary housing assistance. You want me to donate my inheritance to charity? I want us to use our inheritance to change lives, David corrected. Maya, what if instead of trying to figure out how to spend $42 million on ourselves, we figured out how to use it to help people like Walter and Sarah? People like you were just 4 days ago? Maya thought about the tent behind the gas station, about the soup kitchens and the constant anxiety of not knowing where her next meal would come from. She thought about Walter's tears and Sarah's brave smile and the dozens of homeless people she'd met during her months on the street. How would it work? We'd still take care of ourselves, comfortable homes, financial security, everything we need. But the bulk of the money would go toward helping others. Emergency assistance, long-term housing solutions, job training programs, medical bill assistance. David's eyes lit up. We could create the kind of safety net that might have prevented you from ending up homeless in the first place. Maya felt something stirring in her chest, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since losing her job months ago. David, can I tell you something? Anything. For the past 3 days, I've been terrified about this inheritance. Not just because it's overwhelming, but because I kept thinking about all the people I left behind. All the homeless people I met, who are still sleeping in doorways and under bridges while I'm here in this mansion. Maya's voice grew stronger. I felt guilty about getting lucky when they didn't. And now? Now I think maybe the guilt was the point. Maybe I was supposed to experience that life, so I'd know how to help people who are still living it. David smiled. So you're interested in the foundation idea? I'm more than interested. I think it's exactly what we should do. Maya stood up, pacing to the window. But I want to do more than just write checks. I want to be involved. I want to understand the programs and meet the people we're helping. Maya, you could run the whole foundation if you wanted to. Make it your full-time job. Maya turned back to him, feeling a surge of excitement for the first time since arriving at the estate. Really? Really? We'll hire you the best staff, give you all the resources you need, and let you build something amazing. They spent the next 2 hours sketching out ideas for expanding the Chen Family Foundation. They talked about emergency housing programs, job training initiatives, medical assistance funds, and educational scholarships. They discussed partnerships with existing charities and the possibility of opening regional offices in other cities. By the time Margaret and Robert returned, Maya felt like she'd found her purpose. Have you two decided how you want to handle the inheritance issues? Margaret asked. Actually, Maya said, we've decided to get creative. What would be the tax implications of donating most of the inheritance to charity? Margaret and Robert exchanged surprised glances. That would actually solve most of our problems, Robert said slowly. Charitable donations of that size would provide enormous tax benefits. We could structure it so that you maintain personal financial security while directing the bulk of the assets toward philanthropic purposes. And the timeline? Much faster. We could have preliminary structures in place within a few weeks instead of months. Maya looked at David, who nodded encouragingly. Then let's do it. Let's turn this inheritance into something that would make our great-grandfather proud. That afternoon, Maya called Jessica to update her on the latest developments. Wait, Jessica said, you're telling me that you just inherited $42 million and your first instinct is to give most of it away? Not give it away, Maya corrected. Invest it in helping people. Jess, I've been thinking about this all day. 3 days ago, I was homeless and hopeless. If someone had offered me emergency housing assistance or job training, or just a temporary place to stay while I got back on my feet, my whole life would have been different. But Maya, this is your chance to be set for life. You could buy a house, travel the world, never work again if you didn't want to. I could do all of those things with just the small portion we're keeping for personal use. But Jess, what's the point of being comfortable if I know there are people out there going through what I just went through? Jessica was quiet for a moment. You really think this is what you want? You're not just feeling guilty about suddenly being rich? I think this is what I was meant to do, Maya said. I think maybe everything that happened to me losing my Job, becoming homeless, giving Walter that $5. Maybe it was all leading to this moment. "You sound different," Jessica observed. "Stronger. More confident than you have in years." Maya looked around her guest room, then out the window at the estate grounds where she could see David talking with Walter near the gardens. "I feel different. For the first time in months, I feel like I have a purpose bigger than just surviving day to day." That evening, Maya and David had dinner on the terrace, discussing their plans for the foundation while watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "David," Maya said, cutting into the most perfectly prepared salmon she'd ever tasted, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Why aren't you married? Why don't you have kids? I mean, you're obviously successful, you're kind, you're handsome." Enough. Maya felt herself blushing. "I'm sorry, that was too personal." David laughed. "It's not too personal. It's a fair question." He was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I suppose I never found the right person. I've dated, had a few serious relationships, but something was always missing." "What kind of something?" "Purpose, I think. Shared values. Most of the women I've met in my social circle are more interested in the lifestyle my money can provide than in actually building something meaningful together." David paused. "I've always wanted a partner who cared more about what we could accomplish together than what we could buy." Maya felt something flutter in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine they were sharing. "And now?" "Now I think I might have found someone who understands what really matters." Their eyes met across the table, and Maya felt the world shift slightly on its axis. David wasn't just her cousin and benefactor, he was a man she was beginning to care about in ways that had nothing to do with family or money. "David," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and complication. David set down his wine glass and reached across the table to take her hand. "Maya," he said, "I need to tell you something too." "What?" "I think I fell in love with you the moment Walter told me about a homeless woman who gave away her last $5 to help a stranger." Maya felt tears spring to her eyes. "But we're cousins." "Second cousins, but still ... Second cousins who met as adults, who had no idea they were related until 3 days ago." David's thumb traced across her knuckles. "Maya, there's nothing wrong with what we're feeling. Second cousins can legally marry in most states." "Marry?" Maya's voice came out as a squeak. David's face turned red. "I'm not proposing. I just meant ... legally speaking." "If we wanted to ... Maya started laughing. "David Chen, are you trying to tell me you want to date your newfound cousin? Is that completely insane?" Maya considered the question seriously. Everything about her life had become insane in the past 3 days. She'd gone from homeless to heiress, from friendless to finding family, from hopeless to running a multi-million-dollar foundation. Adding romance to the mix didn't seem any crazier than anything else that had happened. "No more insane than anything else this week," she said finally. "But David, I need you to understand something. If we do this, if we try to build something romantic together, it can't be about the money or the inheritance or any of that. It has to be about us. It is about us," David said. "Maya, the money brought us together, but it's not what's keeping us together. What's keeping us together is the fact that we both want to use our good fortune to help other people. What's keeping us together is the fact that you're the first person I've ever met who cares more about Walter's happiness than your own comfort." Maya squeezed his hand. "So what do we do now?" "Now we take things slow. We get to know each other without the pressure of inheritance complications. We build the foundation together and see if what we're feeling is real or just gratitude and proximity. And if it's real," David smiled, "then we'll figure out how to blend a family reunion with a love story." That night, Maya lay in her cloud soft bed thinking about the strange turns her life had taken. 4 days ago, she'd been a homeless woman with $5 to her name. Tonight, she was a multi-millionaire philanthropist who might be falling in love with her second cousin. Life, she thought, was stranger than any fiction she'd ever read. But as she drifted off to sleep, her last thought was about the silver bracelet on her wrist and Sarah's words about kindness being like magic. Maybe the little girl had been right. Maybe kindness really did create its own kind of magic, the kind that could transform lives in ways no one could have imagined. Maya touched the heart charm on her bracelet and smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow she will start building something beautiful from the ashes of her old life. And maybe, if she was very lucky, she would do it alongside someone who understood that the best kind of wealth was the kind you shared with others. 2 weeks after Maya's DNA results were confirmed, the transformed Chen Family Foundation held its first planning meeting in the estate's library. Maya sat at the head of a long mahogany table, surrounded by social workers, nonprofit administrators, and financial advisors, all people David had helped her recruit to build their dream into reality. "Let's start with the housing initiative," Maya said, consulting her notes. She'd spent the past 2 weeks immersing herself in learning about homelessness, poverty assistance, and effective charitable programs. The education had been overwhelming but thrilling, like drinking from a fire hose of purpose. "We've identified 3 potential sites for transitional housing facilities," reported Linda Martinez, the nonprofit administrator they'd hired to run day-to-day operations. Each could house 15 to 20 families for up to 18 months while they received job training and counseling services. Maya studied the property proposals. "What's the total cost for all 3 facilities?" "Approximately $4 million for purchase and renovation, plus $2 million annually for operating expenses, $6 million. Maya still couldn't quite wrap her mind around numbers that large, but she was learning to think in terms of impact rather than cost. $6 million could house and train over 200 families per year, potentially breaking the cycle of homelessness for generations. "Approved," Maya said. "What's next?" They spent 3 hours reviewing programs: medical bill assistance for families facing bankruptcy due to health crises, educational scholarships for children aging out of foster care, emergency grants for people in temporary financial distress, and job training programs for people seeking to change careers. By the end of the meeting, they had committed to spending over $15 million in the first year alone, more money than Maya had ever imagined she'd see in a lifetime, now being deployed to help thousands of people. After the meeting, Maya and David walked through the estate gardens, debriefing on the day's decisions. "Any regrets?" David asked, taking her hand as they strolled past a rose garden. "About the money? None at all." Maya squeezed his fingers. "David, I keep thinking about the families we're going to help. Children who won't have to worry about being evicted, people who won't have to choose between medical treatment and groceries, families who won't end up sleeping in their cars." "And about us?" David's voice was carefully neutral. Maya stopped walking and turned to face him. Over the past 2 weeks, their relationship had deepened gradually. They'd shared dinners and long conversations, gentle touches, and a few soft kisses. But they'd been careful not to rush into anything too intense, while Maya was still adjusting to her new life. "I'm falling harder for you every day," Maya admitted. "But David, sometimes I worry that I'm not thinking clearly. My whole world has changed so dramatically that I don't trust my own emotions." David cupped her face in his hands. "Maya, what if I told you I've been feeling the same way? What if I told you that sometimes I wonder if I'm confusing gratitude with love? Are you?" "No," David said firmly. "I know the difference. Gratitude is what I feel when you approve a new program that will help more families. Love is what I feel when you laugh at something funny, or when you get that determined look in your eyes when you're passionate about something, or when you wake up in the morning with your hair going in 6 different directions." Maya laughed. You've seen my hair in the morning? I may have walked past your room a few times when you left your door open. That's very stalker-like behavior, Mr. Chen. I prefer to think of it as romantic surveillance. Maya stood on her tiptoes and kissed him softly. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. Not because you gave me a new life, but because of who you are when you think no one is watching. What do you mean? I've seen you slip extra money to Walter when you think he won't notice. I've seen you personally call families who've applied for assistance to make sure they're okay. I've seen you tear up when Linda tells stories about children we've helped. Maya traced her finger along his jawline. I love you because you have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met. That evening, Maya was working in the library when Elena knocked on the doorframe. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Maya looked up from the grant proposal she'd been reviewing. Who is it? A young woman named Rebecca. She has a baby with her, and she seems quite distressed. Maya hurried to the front entrance where she found a girl who couldn't have been more than 19, holding an infant and trying to stop herself from crying. Rebecca wore clothes that had obviously been slept in, and she had the hollow look Maya recognized from her own months on the street. Rebecca, I'm Maya. Elena said you needed to see me. I'm sorry to just show up like this, Rebecca said, her voice shaking. But I didn't know where else to go. Someone at the homeless shelter said you might be able to help. Maya's heart went out to the young mother immediately. Of course. Please come in. Can I get you some food? Something to drink? I haven't eaten since yesterday, Rebecca admitted. Maya led Rebecca to the kitchen, where she quickly assembled a plate of sandwiches and soup while Rebecca fed her baby from a bottle. Tell me what's happening, Maya said gently. Rebecca's story came out in pieces between bites of food. She was 18 years old, had aged out of foster care 6 months earlier, and had been working at a convenience store until her baby was born 3 weeks ago. Without paid maternity leave, she'd lost her job. Her landlord had evicted her when she couldn't make rent, and she'd been staying at the shelter with her 3-week-old son. The shelter can only keep us for 2 more days, Rebecca explained, tears streaming down her face. After that, I don't know what we'll do. I've applied for jobs, but nobody wants to hire someone with a newborn baby. Maya felt her heart breaking for this young mother facing an impossible situation. Rebecca, what kind of work did you do before the baby was born? Retail mostly, but I was taking online college classes too. I want to be a nurse someday. What if I told you there might be a way for you to go back to school while taking care of your baby? Rebecca looked up hopefully. Really? Maya excused herself and called David, quickly explaining the situation. Within an hour, they had Rebecca and her baby settled in one of the guest rooms, while Maya called Linda Martinez to discuss emergency assistance options. We can fast-track her application for transitional housing, Linda explained over the phone. We also have partnerships with local colleges for single mothers pursuing healthcare careers. She could potentially receive full tuition assistance plus childcare support. Maya hung up the phone and returned to Rebecca, who was rocking her sleeping baby in the guest room's comfortable chair. Rebecca, how would you feel about being our foundation's first official client? Over the next 2 hours, Maya walked Rebecca through the programs they could offer. Emergency housing in one of their transitional facilities, full tuition for nursing school, childcare assistance, and a modest monthly stipend for living expenses while she completed her education. I don't understand, Rebecca said, staring at the paperwork. Why would you do all this for someone you don't even know? Maya sat down beside the young mother, thinking about how to explain. Rebecca, 3 weeks ago, I was sleeping in a tent behind an abandoned gas station. I was homeless, hungry, and completely hopeless. The only reason I'm sitting here today is because a series of kind people chose to help me when I needed it most.